For years, Russian forces trusted their layered air defenses, mobile launchers, and deep logistics hubs, convinced no American missile could strike without warning. But that belief collapsed the moment the U.S. quietly delivered its deadliest weapon, the ATACMS. Now in Ukrainian hands, this precision missile has already shattered key Russian positions before they even knew it was coming. How far can it reach? How much destruction has it already caused? Join us as we reveal how the U.S. ATACMS missile is rewriting the battlefield in Ukraine. The U.S. Army's tactical missile system, better known as ATACMS, is a long-range, precision-guided missile designed to hit specific targets up to 300 kilometers away. Unlike traditional artillery that fires at large enemy areas, ATACMS is built to strike exact locations with deadly accuracy, often within 10 meters of the target. In recent months, interest in ATACMS has grown sharply. On September 21, 2024, several media outlets reported that President Biden had privately promised to send a limited number of ATACMS missiles to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during a closed-door meeting at the White House. But so far, the U.S. government has not officially confirmed this, and the missile was not included in the latest $325 million military aid package. Still, speaking anonymously, at least 4 U.S. officials shared details of the possible deal with the press. If accurate, this would represent a major shift in U.S. policy. For over a year, Washington had refused Ukraine's repeated requests for ATACMS, mainly due to concerns the missile could be used to strike deep inside Russian territory. Another key reason was the Pentagon's wish to save its limited stockpiles for future threats, especially possible tensions with countries like China. When it comes to performance, ATACMS is a powerful weapon. It weighs 227 kilograms and is launched from the M270 rocket system, which usually carries 2 pods of 6 smaller rockets each. But because of ATACMS' large size, 13 feet long and 22 inches wide, it takes up an entire pod independently. This means the M270 can carry only 1 ATACMS missile per pod. Its firepower is just as impressive. Armed with a unitary warhead, each missile has a kill radius of about 80 meters. This makes it far more deadly than standard 155mm artillery with a blast area about 60% wider. ATACMS first made its name during Operation Desert Storm, where it proved itself as a reliable ground-launched missile. Today, the U.S. Army is believed to have around 1,486 ATACMS missiles, according to numbers reported by the Washington Post. Of these, about 364 are fitted with cluster munitions, while the rest use unitary warheads designed for single, powerful explosions. Still, the Pentagon has not officially confirmed these figures, sticking to its usual policy of secrecy for national security reasons. This cautious approach reflects the missile's complicated production history. In 2007, the U.S. officially ended ATACMS production due to high costs and a shift in military focus. At the time, America was involved in counterinsurgency wars, where long-range missiles like ATACMS were considered less valuable. For nearly 10 years, no new units were made. That changed in 2016, when the U.S. Army started a service life extension program to refurbish and upgrade older missiles. By 2018, the first updated missiles were back in service, giving the aging stock a second life. Originally, Lockheed Martin built about 4,000 ATACMS missiles across different versions. Around 600 were used during the Iraq War, which would leave about 3,400 missiles in theory. But in reality, that number is much lower. Missile components like fuel, motors, and explosives break down over time. Most ATACMS missiles have a shelf life of about 10 years, meaning many older ones have already been retired or scrapped. Even with a shrinking U.S. inventory, global demand for the missile is rising fast. 8 American allies already use the system, and at least 6 more countries are trying to buy it. In 2022 alone, Lockheed Martin built 500 new ATACMS missiles, but none went to the U.S. military. Every one of them was sold to foreign buyers. Some of the biggest deals came from Australia, which signed a $385 million contract and received its first missiles that same year. In April 2023, Morocco followed with an even bigger agreement worth $524 million. With deals this large, buyer countries are unlikely to delay or redirect shipments, even if global tensions rise. However, boosting production isn't easy. A 2020 fact sheet from Lockheed Martin showed that making the ATACMS depends on a wide and complex supply chain, 134 different suppliers spread across 29 U.S. states, including 65 small businesses. Each one provides specific parts or services. The entire production schedule can be thrown off if even one component, like a key microprocessor, is delayed. Because of this, increasing output by just 10% is not as simple as adding more factory hours. It's a logistical puzzle, one that takes time, coordination, and careful planning to solve. Although the ATACMS became well known for its role in Middle Eastern wars, its real importance comes from its origin story, a history shaped by Cold War fears and shifting military strategies. In the early days of the Cold War, US and NATO forces faced a serious problem. They were outnumbered by Soviet and Warsaw Pact armies. To compensate for this, NATO's primary defense strategy relied heavily on tactical nuclear weapons. These were seen as the only way to stop large enemy forces if they invaded Western Europe. But by the mid-1970s, new advances in precision weapons and battlefield coordination made this nuclear-heavy strategy seem outdated and dangerous. NATO realized it needed a new approach, one that could fight large battles without immediately jumping to nuclear war. That shift led to a new military concept called air-land battle. While the Soviet plan known as deep battle focused on overwhelming strength and fast-moving waves of attack, NATO aimed for precision, timing, and flexibility. In deep battle, the Soviets would launch an initial wave across the front line, looking for weak spots. Then elite units from a second wave would hit those areas hard to break through. After that, more troops would pour in, striking deep into enemy territory, destroying supply lines, communications, and command posts to break enemy coordination quickly. Air-land battle was built to stop this process before it could unfold. While aircraft were a major part of this plan, missile systems like ATACMS became just as important. They could strike fast and far, hitting key targets behind enemy lines before Soviet reinforcements reached the front. The first version of ATACMS was the M39 Block 1, a missile that carried up to 950 small explosives called submunitions and had a range of 165 kilometers. It was made to hit large groups of enemy troops and vehicles. But as warfare changed, the U.S. Army began replacing cluster munitions with unitary warheads, single powerful explosives that are better for hitting bunkers, headquarters, and other strong targets. This change showed a move from wide-area attacks to pinpoint strikes. Each ATACMS missile cost more than $1.5 million, placing it among the most expensive ground-launched weapons in the U.S. arsenal. Its cost matches its performance, but the road to building ATACMS wasn't smooth. The program faced many technical problems and delays that nearly shut it down completely. The turning point came with the help of DARPA. In 1978, DARPA launched a project called the Assault Breaker Program. Unlike most traditional weapons programs focusing on building a single missile or system, Assault Breaker aimed to create the building blocks to turn ordinary, unguided rockets into smart, precision-guided weapons. This meant developing new sensors, radar systems, and electronic guidance tools, technologies that would later advance modern missiles. The program cost $155 million and delivered innovations that would shape the future of American military power. Two of its most important breakthroughs were the ring laser gyroscope and the digital strap-down inertial guidance system. To test the new technology, engineers fitted it into a prototype missile and fired it from 64 kilometers away. It struck just 25 meters from its target, proof that precision strikes from long distances were now possible. As the 1980s began, the U.S. Department of Defense pushed for greater efficiency. In March 1981, it merged separate missile projects from the Army and Air Force into one joint program. The goal was to cut costs, avoid repeating work, and encourage teamwork. However, this plan didn't go smoothly either. The Army and Air Force had very different ideas. The Army wanted a missile that could be launched from the ground to support troops. The Air Force, on the other hand, wanted a design that could be carried inside bomber planes like the B-52. This meant the missile had to be smaller and more versatile. Tensions grew when the Air Force insisted on adding stealth technology, making the missile harder to detect but more complex and expensive. Because of this, the Air Force raised the project's classification level, making it too secret for most Army officers to access. In effect, the Army was locked out of its program. By August 19, 1984, the joint effort was falling apart. Conflicting goals, secrecy issues, and constant delays had made progress nearly impossible. So a decision was made to split the project. The Army would take full control of its missile version and continue alone. With that freedom, the Army moved quickly. By November 1990, it had finalized contracts to begin full-scale production of the ATACMS. But just as things were getting on track, a major problem emerged. The lead contractor, LTV Corporation, suddenly lost one of its key partners. Singer Corporation, which supplied the system that controlled the missile's movement, shut down. Without that part, the entire project was at risk. LTV was on the verge of failing its contract, an outcome that could have led to bankruptcy. LTV's project manager, Bud Laughlin, quickly saved the program. He found a new supplier, Simmons Precision Motion Control, and moved to their New Jersey site for 6 months. He oversaw the transition, ensuring production resumed smoothly and stayed on schedule. After years of research, delays, and technical challenges, the Army Tactical Missile System was finally ready. Often compared to tactical ballistic missile systems like Russia's Iskander or China's DF series, the ATACMS stands out with features that give it a unique edge. Most foreign systems rely on dedicated transporter erector launcher vehicles, large, easily recognized platforms that are easy to spot with satellites and radar. In contrast, the American system was designed with stealth and flexibility. Instead of building a new type of launcher, engineers made sure ATACMS could be fired from existing platforms, such as the M270. The missile is stored in a launch pod cover that looks exactly like the one used for standard six-pack rocket artillery to keep its appearance low-key. This innovative design lets U.S. forces deploy the weapon without drawing attention. On the battlefield, observers can't tell which launchers carry basic rockets and which are loaded with long-range precision missiles. The M270 and HIMARS launch vehicles that support ATACMS are equipped with built-in winches, allowing reloads to be completed in 3 to 5 minutes. This quick turnaround improves battlefield performance and reinforces the weapon's strategic mystery. With no visual difference between ordinary rocket systems and ATACMS units, enemy forces are kept in the dark. That uncertainty makes it harder for them to predict launch points or plan around the missile's range. The first 32 ATACMS used in conflict were highly successful, each reportedly hitting its intended target. This flawless performance gave the weapon an almost legendary status among U.S. troops, nicknamed AT&T after the telecom company's famous slogan, "Reach out and touch someone," a tribute to its long reach and pinpoint accuracy. The first version of ATACMS relied only on inertial navigation. Even without satellite support, it could hit targets within about 50 meters at its maximum range, an impressive achievement for late 1980s technology. At the same time, its Soviet rival, the OTR-21, had a shorter range of just 70 kilometers and a much larger margin of error, around 150 meters. A breakthrough came in 1996 with the Block 1A upgrade, which added GPS guidance. This dramatically improved the missile's accuracy, reducing the error margin to under 25 meters. It also allowed the designers to reduce the missile's payload weight, extending its reach to 300 kilometers. Control of the missile's development shifted in 1992, when the original developer, LTV, sold its missile division to Lockheed Martin. Since then, Lockheed Martin has led the project, continuing to refine and improve the system. Several new versions were introduced in the late 1990s and early 2000s. One of the more ambitious upgrades was a variant carrying guided anti-tank submunitions called BAT, short for Brilliant Anti-Tank. While this version showed early promise, it was eventually canceled in 2002. Around the same time, the U.S. Army moved away from all cluster munition types of ATACMS in favor of unitary warheads. These single explosive warheads were more accurate and carried a lower risk of leaving behind unexploded bombs. Today, ATACMS plays a crucial role in modern warfare, especially in the shifting landscape of Eastern Europe. Built for speed, accuracy, and deep strikes, it does what slower cruise missiles can't. Fast-paced battle conditions give the U.S. and its allies a clear edge. Other systems, like the Storm Shadow cruise missile, take longer to prepare and reach their targets. While Storm Shadow might take over 15 minutes, ATACMS can strike in a third of the time, giving enemies little chance to hide or respond. This quick strike ability is critical. Russian forces have placed key sites, like command centers, supply depots, and air bases, just beyond the reach of Ukraine's current Western-supplied rocket systems. These targets stay safe without longer-range weapons, allowing Russia to operate freely. ATACMS changes that. It can reach deep behind enemy lines and hit those high-value targets hard. This is especially important for stopping Russian artillery and aircraft. Long-range Russian guns can fire safely from behind the front unless quickly targeted. Air defenses help, but are expensive and not always dependable. ATACMS offers a more direct solution, destroying threats on the ground before they can strike or take off. While the Storm Shadow remains a valuable weapon, it has clear limits. Since it is launched from an aircraft, each mission needs careful planning, fuel checks, and coordination. This makes fast or large-scale launches difficult. In contrast with little delay, ATACMS can be fired from ground systems like HIMARS. This gives it a major edge in fast-moving operations where speed and flexibility matter. Planes also need full maintenance after each mission, and pilots must rest, factors that limit how often airstrikes can happen. That's why air-launched weapons like Storm Shadow are usually saved for only the most vital targets. For Ukraine, geography adds another challenge. Storm Shadows can't be fired from the front lines. They must travel from distant air bases, reducing their effective range and limiting how they're used. On the other hand, ATACMS is launched from a HIMARS vehicle, a quick mobile platform built on a truck. It needs much less maintenance than an aircraft, fewer crew, and less planning. This makes it perfect for fast, on-the-spot strikes in intense combat situations. Despite its strong track record, ATACMS is nearing the end of its service life. Designed nearly 30 years ago, it has long been due for replacement. The U.S. Army is now preparing to adopt its successor, the Precision Strike Missile, known as PRSM, also developed by Lockheed Martin. This new system improves on nearly every aspect of ATACMS. It flies farther, hits more accurately, and features a modular design for future upgrades. Initially, PRSM was capped at a range of 500 kilometers to comply with the now defunct Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, a Cold War-era agreement between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. That restriction ended when the U.S. withdrew in 2018, citing repeated Russian violations. With the treaty no longer in effect, PRSM is now expected to exceed 500 kilometers in range. The first units are scheduled to enter U.S. Army service by the end of 2023. Many defense analysts see this timing as deliberate. The recent decision to send ATACMS missiles to Ukraine likely signals Washington's growing confidence in PRSM's readiness. Until now, the U.S. has held back its tactical ballistic missile stockpile for potential conflicts with major powers like Russia, China, or Iran. However, with a next-generation system on the way and production accelerating, the U.S. appears more willing to release some of its older but still competent ATACMS units. As Lockheed Martin ramps up PRSM manufacturing, a new era of long-range precision warfare is taking shape, one that may redefine how future battles are fought. Thanks for watching. Before you go, click the link on your screen to check out another video. See you there.